Ido, you're now serving as acting Counsel General in New York. You have been very concerned over a number of years and have developed this idea of Israel branding. With all of the issues going on right now around the region here in the Middle East, which also affect the rest of the world, why branding on Israel? Why talk about the branding of Israel as a country?
Well, the idea of branding a place is not new. Before they called it branding, they just used to do it. It's basic, very simple marketing. That's what it is, really. And how do you market a place? First of all, you identify the place's relative advantage. So, for example, if you're looking at Jerusalem, the relative advantage of Jerusalem stems from its uniqueness. There's no other place in the entire world like Jerusalem. The spirit, it's a spiritual place. And so once you identify the relative advantage, you then begin a long-term strategic campaign to communicate that relative advantage to the world. That's basic marketing. Believe it or not, we never did that. When we were given a chance to communicate our beautiful country to the world, the only thing we did was to communicate our position vis-a-vis the conflict. Now, this was an important thing to do. It's called crisis management. But we never did anything else but crisis management. And we came and said, look, it's time for Israel to begin the celebration of its own relative advantages, of its own contribution to the world. So we identified areas in which we possess a clear competitive edge, like, for example, Israeli creativity, Israeli innovation, Israeli energy, the kind of renewal that exists here, the kind of resilience that you see even when you read the Bible. You know, you see that resilience, it's been there. This is the DNA of Israel. So when you brand a place, you're actually looking for the DNA, for that core meaning of that place, whether it's New York or London or Jerusalem or Tel Aviv.
Let's talk about, you mentioned the resilience of the people and as old as the Bible in that sense. When you look at the region and Israel's stability in the region, despite times when the region's been in conflict, first, is Israel, in your view, and you're obviously well qualified to talk about this, the most stable democracy in this region? Or is it the only democracy, true democracy in the region?
Well, first of all, technically, Israel is the only Western democracy, the Western-style democracy in the region. It is stable simply because it is built upon the same, foundation like America. If you look at it from a value point of view, you can see that Israel certainly over the years served and functioned as, I would even say, an outpost of American value system and the Western value system in the Middle East. We're surrounded by enemies in a constant state of war, yet we're thriving. Israeli economy is booming. And the only explanation is that, unique Israeli spirit, unique Israeli creative energy, if you may, that innovation is tightly linked to survivability. The only reason why we managed to survive all those years is because we were we were forced to become innovative and creative.
Let's talk about some of the other aspects of what's going on in the region, specifically Iran. In the United States right now, the UN, there's been sanctions imposed against Iran. There are not just the United States and not just Israel, a large number of countries are concerned about Iran and potential nuclear capabilities, which seems to be unfolding literally as we speak here in Jerusalem. How significant of a threat is Iran, first to Israel and then to the rest of the world?
Well, we think it's a major threat. We've been probably the most vocal country in the entire world about this issue. We've been talking about it for years. And finally, we can sense that there's a solid coalition, an international coalition that is prepared to take to make those decisions to stop nuclear Iran. We always claim that nuclear Iran poses a challenge and a threat not only to its own immediate neighbors like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, not only to Israel, but to the entire world. It's an international problem and therefore requires a well-orchestrated, well-organized international effort to stop that. And the United States is now taking the lead, and we're seeing some progression. I think it's a great thing.
Are you convinced, as a diplomat, as someone that's experienced in this area, that Iran's intent is to develop nuclear capability weaponized, a weaponized nuclear capability?
Look, I don't have to be a scholar. You just read Ahmadinejad's own speeches. You read their philosophy. You read their comments that they're making in public speeches in the Iranian press and international press. And it's clear. Their intention is right there. They're saying it explicitly. They deny Israel's right to exist. They basically stand against every value that you're familiar with in America, from freedom of speech to women's rights to just about every issue. They're on the wrong side of the issue. So of course, when such a country is given nuclear capabilities, it's a concern, not only for Israel, but also to the entire community.
As acting Counsel General in New York, how do you communicate that message to the people in New York, the people you'll be dealing with, which really, because it's New York, it affects the rest of the globe, about the significance and seriousness of the Iranian threat?
Well, I think that the most effective way to do it is to target influentials and decision makers and simply convey the message to them. On the Iranian issue, I less believe in high public profile. And I truly believe that the way to do it is to expose the message in the places that really matter. Because for the average person on the street, especially if you live in Tennessee or somewhere else, it's not. The Iranian threat is not something that you live with. Here in Israel, we wake up in the morning and that's what we have on our minds because it's so close, because we're within range. But it's very difficult to convince a farmer in California that he should be concerned with the Iranian issue. But the governor of California is a different story. The senators in California is a different story. So we believe in working, targeting people, decision makers, influentials, and so on. That's the right way to do it.
You've now got a situation where there's a lot of concern that what happens in Lebanon with Hezbollah, with Hamas in Gaza, is basically a proxy war for Iran. Is Iran engaging in a proxy war?
Well, I think that the Second Lebanon War, 2006, was a classical example of a proxy war. We know that the regime in Iran has been very active, exporting, if you may, the Iranian Revolution and the Islamic Revolution since 1979. This is not a new thing. We know that Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and the likes are all fed by the Iranian system. They're being trained by them. They're being provided with technical support, with spiritual support, and with financial support. We know all of that.
Is the impact of that, I want to follow that up, is the impact of the reality that Iran is engaging in these proxy war, is that being communicated effectively? We're not even talking about to the leadership around the world. In other words, this is not just a Middle East issue. It's much deeper. Is that being communicated effectively right now, or you're the branding guy? I mean, could this be communicated better?
Yeah, well, I have to tell you, and I'm not wearing my branding hat right now, that I worked with foreign ministers, and at least in the last several years, I did not attend not even one, serious diplomatic meeting when this was not on the agenda. So it is being communicated very forcefully, not only by Israeli diplomats, by the way. Now there's a whole community, international community, that deals with this issue. I think they're dealing with it seriously, and I think that you can see the progression on the ground in terms of building the opposition and taking action. Which
begs the question, if world opinion is looking at Iran not only suspiciously, but that they're dangerous, and it's now becoming a global issue, why are the Iranians continuing, or at least the regime, not the people, but the regime, continuing to press forward so aggressively? The statements they've made just in the last 24, 48 hours.
Well, I think they're making a mistake. I think that they're primarily interested in becoming a regional superpower, and I think they're making a big mistake. They're making a big mistake because they're trying to change the regional balance without the consent of superpowers, without the consent of the leading forces in the world, and I think there's a price tag attached to that.
You're getting ready to leave to go to New York for the new mission as the acting Counsel General. There's about to be negotiations between the Palestinians, the Palestinian Authority, and the Israelis. What's your sense of these negotiations? Is there, do you sense, and it may be too early to tell, but do you sense that there could be some positive developments here, or is anytime they're talking a positive, the sides are talking?
Well, I hope so. I certainly hope so. I think most Israelis hope that we'll see some progress in the negotiations. But I think it's important for your viewers to know that you need to look at the events, the upcoming events on September 2nd, you know, within the larger framework. Let's see the big picture. And you have to, in order for you to understand what's going on now, you have to understand what happened in the last decade. And the defining moment took place actually in the summer of 2000. What happened in the summer of 2000? See, up until that point, most Israelis believed that the unfinished business between us and the Palestinians was the 1967 Six-Day War, which was really about territory. And there was a whole concept in Israeli society, Israeli political life, that talked about territorial compromise, meaning we will give them territory, and what we will get in return is peace and security.
Land for peace.
Land for peace. And then what happened? Former President Bill Clinton convened a summit in the summer of 2000, Camp David. He put forth a very far-reaching compromise that would have given the Palestinians 98% of their territorial demands, including shared sovereignty over Jerusalem and everything, the whole package. While Israelis said yes, the Palestinians not only said no, immediately thereafter they waged war, not against Israeli soldiers only, but mostly against Israeli civilians. If you remember, 75% of our casualties and fatalities during the Second Intifada were civilians. So that convinced the Israelis that the issue is not really land. This is not about 67, the unfinished business between us and the Palestinians. And this is today, if you'll ask the average Israeli, this is the answer that you're going to get. The unfinished business between us and the Palestinians is 1948, which was over our very right to exist in the region. So the issue is not really, and you know what? The pullout from Gaza was the best example. Israel uprooted 8,000 households, demolished 25 settlements, and what did we get in return? 7 years of misery. 35,000 rockets were fired on peaceful civilians in the Israeli south. That convinced the Israelis that the Palestinians are not serious. So if you want to understand the way Israelis look at the upcoming talks, of course, great hope. We would love for this effort to be successful and bear some fruit, but at the same time, you know, we are very experienced and we've been there. We've done that before. Let's wait and see what happens. Israel is very serious about making peace. I'm not sure that's the case on the other side.